photography, it's a huge part of my self-understanding. So the and it's impossible to describe it because it's not important for other persons, because other persons could read in these images probably social political ideas, probably some ironic aspects, probably artists who plays or experiments. But this self-portrait things is kind of very important for me because these images represents for me myself.
Welcome to the show, Alnis.
Hello. Well, I'm glad to participate and to try to answer some questions and to introduce to my works.
When I was doing research on you, I really enjoyed diving into your work. You have a conceptual approach and you have a photographic approach that's really, really strong, and I really enjoyed diving into your world. So for those that don't know you, go ahead and take a moment and dive into your background and dive into who you are.
Well, I came from Latvian. Actually, I'm a photography teacher and I'm a photographer. I work documentary, conceptually. And I kind of have a long experience with photography since, I guess, I'm 14 years old. So from first camera, when I got from my parents kind of gift, and I started to photograph, and then later, I guess at 20 years age, I understood that I kind of want to make art, and I want to be an artist with camera. So actually, it's almost 30 years I'm doing photography in a very, very different way. But my dream was to teach photography actually as well. It was actually unmotivated dream, I guess, when I was 20 years only old. And I guess it was almost 10 years later, at 30 years, I got that opportunity to teach photography at more than 3 places in Latvia. So I can have long experience with teaching with NGO and universities and different kind of level education and different approaches to photography. So I spent almost now kind of 20 years teaching photography as well. So not only doing my art and photography as kind of practice.
So you've had that dream of being a photography teacher from like the beginning. So what was it about being a teacher that was important to you?
Well, when I started to do photography, it was, let's say at age 20, it was 28 years ago.
Okay.
The Latvia actually was kind of desert-like place for visual culture. So there was no galleries dedicated to photography. We still have only one gallery dedicated to photography, but we actually didn't have any kind of good books about photography or arts in libraries. It was not internet time, so you can go just to iPhone and to find everything what you want. So it's kind of almost desert-like place for visual culture. If you want to learn photography, there was no institutions. And my dream was kind of to be photography teacher and to create the first study program in bachelor level program in Latvia. So I did it actually. It was we got accreditation of program at Rigas Stradins University 2014 or 2013, and that's kind of long journey. And so now we live in absolutely different era of internet and communication time. So we can get everything to see, to learn, to study, being in one place simultaneously to be in other places through both screens, and it's So when I talk about dreaming, about kind of teaching photography, it was kind of feelings that I want to kind of change the place where I live. Actually, it was absolutely empty place. I don't mean that there was no photographers. There were a lot of photographers and good photographers and artists, but the place, like for lens-based artists, was absolutely like empty. For you can do everything and you will be first, almost. But and especially if we talk about education, and that was the dream. I managed to kind of to cut through, but still there are a lot of problems.
I really enjoyed reading a interview with you that you were talking about where you were from and that every household seemed to have an amateur photographer. And you were talking about in those early days, you were processing your film in your bathroom. And I was kind of curious if you were still doing that to this day. I thought that was really interesting.
No, actually, I'm not doing now it, but I have kind of small studio. but it's not a big develop the black and white film in a bathroom. I guess it's kind of quite easy and not so dangerous or toxic. So, but I have small studio and I do kind of works which related to materiality of photography, which requires, like for example, chemograms, and which requires kind of chemical process to something. You have to kind of put some kind of chemicals on paper and to dry it, to wash it, and it's so you require bathroom or studio so to do it properly.
Yeah. You have such a strong body of work, and you have conceptual work, and you also do photographic work that I think is really, really interesting. And I'm kind of curious, what inspires you to go in different directions? You know, you have some people that are just following their photographic, but you kind of went a more conceptual way. So what inspired you to do that?
Well, actually, I started at my kind of at my 20s. I started with this kind of two directions with photography. Actually, I really love conventional photography, to go just on a street and to photograph, and I simultaneously like the process of doing something kind of in a studio, and to cropping, to collaging, to doing some kind of post-production processes which changes images. And actually, I have not inserted my first images in my presentation, but I have to mention them. It was images which I took at age 14, 15, 16. And when I started to do kind of art photography with ideas that I will show them in exhibitions, I returned back to these old films, enlarged these images, rephotographed more than one time, cropping some kind of small areas of them, trying to somehow approach them a bit differently, trying to understand it's kind of very intuitively, not to understand, it's kind of unconscious decisions to take some kind of important part out of them and to enlarge them to kind of large scale. And it was kind of my starting point, and simultaneously I was doing kind of normal photography, just going around and photographing. So and all the time actually I kept these two kind of parts of my praxis. So it's nothing strange for me. It's kind of very normal way of doing and working with images and trying to somehow illustrate or approach some ideas which are important for me. But very often it's kind of emotional decision to do something even seemingly very conceptual. There's a lot of unconscious decisions behind them. So why I kind of collaging something? It's well, I have kind of general idea very often, but what images I like, what ideas I like. But when I started doing, there's a kind of huge part of my decisions comes from some kind of emotional and unconscious field.
I really love that part. That is, you can see you're really connected to that, and you're connected to the work, and it expresses itself in such a unique way, and I'm just quite taken by it. Which leads me to my next question: what were you like? You were talking about some early work, and I'm kind of curious. What were you like before you were in photography, and what got you into it?
What made me start? Well, I was kind of I was a kid, so as I told, I was 14 years old, kind of a youngster, and I was kind of very introvert and very typical for Latvian phlegmatic nature or melancholic nature, and so I loved to kind of walk around alone with my camera and to be in woods. And I lived in a small city, and it was kind of period when actually Soviet Union collapsed. It was 90s, and there was a lot of as well industry kind of factories which kind of closed, and they became approachable. You can just walk inside and do what you want to kind of demolish, for example, and as well to go with camera inside and to photograph some kind of broken, I don't know, places which run down buildings, which was partly demolished by persons who wanted to collect iron or something like that. So, and on other side, I was able to kind of very easy to go to woods just to watch pure nature and to be alone or with friends. And it was a kind of very strange childhood, I guess, and I love it to be alone actually. So it's left some marks on me, and I still love to be around with camera, and to be around this camera in some kind of desert-like places or places which are kind of not objectively interesting. And it was the starting point, this kind of walking around, and I guess it was partly very self-therapeutic approach to some, I would say, meditative approach to reality, to get out from reality, actually, from real reality, where I live it in the kind of with some social and with all kind of relationships with parents, which always, I guess, in a youngster age, it's not the best, and the camera was escape from everything.
I know a lot of people that actually can relate to that. I know a few people that use it as an escape. And I was looking at some of your work, and I was kind of taken by the topic. You were exploring your environment. You were watching how this town, your town, was changing, and how industry is changing. And I'm curious, do you think that childhood of you kind of exploring the world around you and asking questions is an important part of your practice today? Does that relate?
Absolutely. I guess the most impressive part of my kind of childhood was these many collapses. Actually, it was not only one collapse of, I mean, social political collapses, because they kind of really left some marks on our lives. And of course, 90s, when Soviet Union broke down, we actually always kind of lived in poverty, actually, and there was no any idea what will follow, because the currency changed a couple of times, and nobody had money, nobody had a job, and I lived in a kind of very industrial small city. It was kind of 13,000 inhabitants. It's kind of very small, like village, but all that city worked for a few fabrics, and they collapsed. There is almost half of city was without job, and it was really kind of harsh experience. Of course, I do not remember it same like my parents, for example. Of course, I lived. I was supported, and I lived kind of more or less well, and but it left some marks on me. What is important, I guess, to pay attention to, for example, all these different kind of industrial buildings, rundown buildings, which I still kind of feel very interesting for me to walk inside and to discover, well, actually nothing. Actually nothing is here. We know that there is nothing, but for photographers it's always kind of trip, which helps somehow to change my understanding of myself, I guess. And that is the reason actually why I call photography kind of religion for me, because I feel that very often I use it like ritual for cell therapy and for kind of meditation. Doesn't matter what kind of photography, but most of photography which kind of related to street and outside, to documenting, to walking and photographing, it's very kind of helping me to get to kind of out of different kind of, would say not problems, but helps me to kind of focus on myself and to get back to some kind of clear ideas about my place in reality.
Yeah, I can relate to that. It's you were talking about how you were using this as a meditation and you were kind of finding your way into photography. So talk to me a little bit about what it was like to kind of make that next step and to kind of further develop yourself in the photographic practice. Did you seek out school or mentor or anything like that?
Well, yes, it's kind of very complicated to, I guess, describe for a person who lived in a kind of West Europe or in the States, to describe that there was no kind of education possibilities in photography at all. and it was kind of very stupid idea. It was considered stupid by myself and considered stupid by my parents, of course, to do something with photography, because they had only experience about kind of wedding photographers or commercial photographers, which doing kind of, well, considered shitty job actually. And it was not very kind of considered as with good incomes. Even these commercial photographers, in my kind of family, not considered kind of very serious, because they're just walking around with camera and getting some small money for documenting something or photographing for commercial purposes. And it's I never talked about to learn photography because it was impossible, first of all. And it was impossible as well, like idea even to learn photography, because what to do as photographer? I had no imagination at my 50 years, when I was 15 years old or 20 years old. I started to study physiotherapy, actually. It's as well left some marks with me, on me, it kind of, the ideas about body, about anatomy, and actually I was interested in biology as well, and it somehow was very naturally to, if you are kind of good at biology and to interested in biology, you are going to study something which related to that kind of study field. And I started, and after first praxis at hospital, I decided, no, it's not for me. And but photography actually came later as I was at university, and there was kind of courses for students, like if you like. It was not considered as education in a, like undergraduate or something like that. It was kind of few credit points, and to study photography, like to just learn technical things. And it was a kind of analog photography time, and we had a kind of huge lab with enlargers and all that stuff that is needed to make black and white photography. So it was period. It was university, but later I moved in my education to, after master studies. It was kind of very long later. I studied art education for my PhD thesis. So it was as well not related directly to photography, but it was kind of related to art education and visual culture, media literacy, which I'm still kind of very interested in. So I always been kind of near that photography, but not like student of photography programs. So that was a reason actually for a dream, and to create opportunity to Latvian students to study photography. And after I started work at Rigas Stradins University, we managed to create undergraduate study program photography, which is kind of part of communication studies, not in art field, but in communication studies. So the students learn not so much about art, but learn more about like mass communication, communication history, anthropology, visual anthropology, and etc. Kind of very specific courses, which kind of, I guess, explain photography much broader than if you look like photography as a part of art industry only.
I relate to you a lot in that story, specifically studying something else other than your art. I think I always had that kind of as a parallel for me, a lot like you. It was, I remember having this moment because I studied business before I got into fine art and photography. And I was specifically remember a moment where I was sitting in the hallway of the business building. And I think I was taking an HR class at that time. And I was sitting there and I just had this moment. It was almost like a lightning strike moment. And it was like, this isn't for me. And so I immediately shifted, and I think I just kind of started pursuing business for a while, and my art followed after that. But I'm kind of curious, for you had these two tracks of art, you had that kind of the conceptual, but also you were doing the photographic, more just a little different practice. And I'm kind of curious, you had your art practice on the side, and you also had this other part. So what drove you to evolve? What was pushing you to get better? What were you looking at? How were you evolving?
Well, so what we have to understand about Latvia, and I guess about many post-Soviet countries, is that there is still no industry. So everything that exists here, like in visual arts or photography, especially in photography and lens-based art, it's pure kind of interest of the persons and absolutely unreasonable decision to do something with photography. I'm talking about purely about art market, about art industry, which actually almost doesn't exist here. Like art market for photography, it's something virtual, more not real. And so you can't survive from art here. And there is a few artists, of course, and of course some classic artists like painters who I guess could survive from art. I hope so. I don't know. But when we talk about photography, it's absolutely impossible. So what the things what I'm doing, it's kind of very much related to photography, but they are not kind of getting incomes. They're not giving me kind of support, I guess, like much support, like financial, I mean. And those photographers who work with photography and arts, they do parallel jobs. They do kind of commercial works very often, or teach. And I guess it's kind of very natural as well for other countries, like West countries, where photographers do kind of simultaneously many many things, and it's absolutely normal. So here we have to kind of more invest in life supporting kind of jobs, and then we have, of course, to work with photography as artists if we want to do it, just without any reason. So, but I kind of feel it's very profitable for photography industry, because those who are not interested in it or just would like, I don't know, dream about kind of fame or hype or money, they're not able to do it. They can't continue to do it, so they just leave the industry. So everything what is left, or this little something what is left, it's kind of very good artists who do it just without any kind of particular reason, just because they love to do it. Or I would say that they can survive, I mean, emotionally or even sometimes physically, not doing it. So that is the thing what I really like about this kind of photography, which comes from countries where we can't find kind of good art market. So you always find the kind of good art, and it's not because there is a funding, there is a kind of huge support by cultural foundations, different or private foundations or galleries, but they exist because just it's can't exist without it. So it's kind of I guess it's a very important part of photography industry in post-Soviet countries.
I think that's what I was trying to get to. It was this idea that like you can't not do it. A lot of the photographers that I meet, they just can't help it. That's what they're always doing. They're either making art or doing something. But I also notice that people are just doing 5 different things, It's not just photo. It's a whole bunch of things that people are doing. And so that leads me to my next question, which is, who are you looking at? Do you have any particular inspirations, or are you kind of intuitively making with your knowledge of photography? I'm curious if you have any particular inspirations.
Of course. Well, I teach photography, so I live in images actually, and I force it to live them. So I can't get rid of them, of course. And of course, they leave impression. And every industry actually, it's not about only arts or photography. Every industry has some history, and we can't get rid of it. And we just doing some steps forward. And it's always based on historical ideas, approaches, images, and personalities. And I guess we even not very often change what the people did in the past, but we're kind of doing some kind of small steps further. Like in a science, for example, we can kind of discover absolutely something new, not knowing what's happened in a history. and not knowing what our colleagues doing in our science, other fields, or in the same field. So same in the arts, we live in a very connected world, and we live in actually, and nowadays especially, we know that art actually kind of very close related to social, political, geopolitical issues, and now we see how world is small and how we related to each other, and how changes in one region could change all the world in a few minutes. So an art is quite close to related to all these issues, because we are kind of all we humans, and we feel compassion. We kind of worried about the same things, and we live in a kind of very close to each other, despite the fact that we live 1,000 kilometers far away from each other. And so I guess that art is quite close to related to all these issues, and most of us who create some kind of stories, or I don't know, investigate something with art as medium. So we're doing about the same world, about the same things, and commenting somehow very differently, but doing kind of very, very, very same things.
Do you have any specific artists that you look at in particular?
What artists? Okay, well, I guess the first artist which was left kind of very strong impression on me, it was Stephen Shore, and Joel Stanfield, Richard Mizrak, all these American artists. Well, but it was because as well I physically managed to move to New York for some while, and that's 2000, around 2000, and I, from desert-like place in Latvia, I got in all these libraries and with all these beautiful art books, which at that time it was not reproduced everything on internet, so you can just go through screen to check out kind of very good books, not like now. And it was left a huge impression on me. And I don't know, I love it very much. Joel Peter Witkin, I remember. I don't know what is the reason of it. Boris Mikhailov, all the Kharkov School of Photography. It's absolutely beautiful. I'm not sure that it's kind of present in my works. I'm like, Stephen Shore, of course, I guess. So it could be something from in my landscape works. So there are many artists, Gerhard Richter, for example, and there's plenty of artists which works I love. And Lee Friedlander, for example.
Oh yeah,
it's in my bookshelf.
All right, this is a great opportunity to go ahead and dive into your world and dive into your work. I know you have some of your early work that you're going to show us, and you've kind of evolved, and you have some more conceptual pieces that we're going to take a look at as well. So let's go ahead and share your screen, and we'll take a look.
Okay, we'll try to explain some early images by me, and I decided to show this series, which actually the real name is Living Space Daugavpils. Later I used LSD. It's actually first my try to somehow document the place where I live at. And the series actually started somehow up around 1998, 2000. That was kind of first images, and until the 2006. And what I really kind of see is as important that Daugavpils is a kind of second largest city in Latvia, and it's truly intercultural city, because there's always been kind of very strange proportion of different people coming and going and staying, all these changes and social turbulences in a past century drastically changed the kind of social environment of the city, because it was belonged as part of Russia and later Latvia, and again Soviet Union, and again Latvia. So and it's all these changes related to migration and related to the people who kind of come for work, because it was a very industrial city. And it was not like kind of culture city. It was more like industrial city at Soviet times. And of course, after the Soviet collapse, it's changed dramatically. And it was very interesting to watch it, how all this mixed up in an environment, in a landscape, where the not clear what will happen next, because it's always looking like a rundown place, a place which very entropic and kind of always on an edge between kind of it will kind of develop or it's kind of just disappears, because people are leaving, people are becoming older, and the younger generation kind of decides to move to other places which are more kind of successful. And another one thing is which is kind of important, because there is a huge Russian-speaking population, which actually visually change, I guess, nothing. But the perception of Daugavpils, like city, it's very stigmatized in Latvian society, because it's considered like a Russian city, and so it's kind of strange place, but actually very familiar for me, of course. And I tried to kind of illustrate or describe it, trying to photograph it. And it was still a time when you can photograph kids on the street and not worrying about privacy and private data. You can just approach them and to ask, okay, can I take a photo of you? We still was not part of European Union, and kind of all these rules, which are now kind of very sensitive to especially if you want to photograph kids, it's almost impossible without their parents. So, and that time it was kind of more free, and it was my kind of ideas that I wanted to try to illustrate that entropic and unstable environment, where the people trying to somehow to construct it and to make convenient for living, but always somehow it's looked not very nice place or dangerous place. And, yeah, it's kids playing. Well, it's not a kind of suitable place for play, but it was kind of used. And what is important for me, it kind of tried to use a color as well, some kind of poetic language, aspects of poetic language of photography, to illustrate somehow past, and to illustrate somehow the places which lost their meaning because of social or geopolitical changes. So, for example, like this one, it's kind of red bricks. Actually, it looks like part of red bricks and kind of wall, but it was a place where which used it for to honor best workers, to put some kind of sign on it, and when it was a kind of functional place for industrial kind of somehow purposes, which I don't know, but it was a place to where they honor good workers. And but if you don't know it, it's kind of just red bricks and then part of some kind of wall, but actually no. So I tried to use a color to illustrate not only kind of pictorial part of photography to making some kind of accents and to guiding the viewer to where to look and to get some kind of visual pleasure, which is of course a huge part of photography, but trying to use these kind of color accents or light accents to somehow give the viewer kind of that feelings that when you start to think about on what you're looking, that you see all that kind of sad and past traumas and something from real kind of social part of landscape. Like for example, this one, this blanket red, which looks quite nice, of course, but if you know the social time set design of blankets, it's kind of it shows not only the nice red something on a wire, but it tells about story about kind of poverty, because it's kind of most traditional and cheapest red blanket. Well, they was in a different colors, but it's so traditional. It was almost in every family, because it's kind of very 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 often kind of use a design in this cheap Soviet time kind of products. So, and it's if you have it, so it means that you don't live good. You're not very rich. You live it actually in poverty probably. But so on the other hand, if you don't know that, you just look on a nice landscape with some color accents, which is kind of poetic thing, and it's nice. It gives some pleasure from viewing. But if you know the story, it becomes kind of sad story.
It seems like in some ways you're kind of grappling with the change of your town and watching it almost deteriorate in some ways. And kind of watching the people kind of grapple with that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. And I like it really how there was a suburb, name it still exists, the suburb Fortress. It's a name of place in Daugavpils, which was always military place, because there was located starting from Russian Empire times some military personnel, and in Soviet times there was as well located military personnel. It was partly closed, but there was some residential buildings. And after 90s, of course, it became open for everyone. And there was the orphan house. I don't know what is it right meaning for it. It's kind of kids without parents living.
An orphanage, yeah.
Yeah, orphanage. And they're just walking around. And they was dressed like this. And, it's actually not. There was nothing to be kind of happy to see it. Actually, it's absolutely truly sad story how it's until nowadays actually managed with all the things in Latvia regarding to people who don't have kind of support from family or dropped. And on the other hand, it's visually, of course, interesting because there's this pattern which repeats pattern on the ground. And I tried to connect this kind of visual things with social things.
I love this image.
it doesn't mean that I was always successful. It's absolutely no. And it's as well fortress suburb now. It's kind of partly renovated, and we have Rothko Museum there, and which is kind of more like tourist place. But long time period ago, it was like that.
Is the town kind of evolving? Is it kind of finding a new identity? You said that this particular place is now has a Rothko museum, and it's now kind of attracting tourism. Is it finding a new identity now?
Well, it's I guess it's partly a successful story, but
Gotcha.
Of course, many of these houses, which was kind of rundown buildings 20 years ago, it's still rundown buildings. But there's a kind of few places which
Gotcha.
functions as a tourist places because it's renovated. There's a motor museum, there's a Rothko museum, and a few other places which are renovated, and it looks nice, and it's kind of becomes like tourist attraction, of course. But for city, it's hard to explain how they getting this funding. Partly it was from European funding, and partly it's from city budget. And they try to somehow manage it to create it kind of more useful environment, which is actually how you see it's kind of looks more like dangerous place or place where not to go. Actually, but the story is actually about kids. It's the same kids from this orphanage, and they're just playing around. Oh, this Soviet time left designs. It's a bus stop design, actually. But now it's removed.
It's almost like you captured a little time capsule, a city, in the middle of change. It's yeah.
Now it looks like it's a kind of real past, which kind of disappeared. Actually, I mean, like real objects, and but at that moment when I photographed it, it seemed like permanent, never changing reality. And now it's kind of time capsule.
I remember this time. You said this was 98 to 2006.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember this. It was a time even before I was from, and it's. I was thinking about my childhood. We could go out, we could build forts and go out into the woods, and we'd be out forever. And I can't even imagine my brother's kids out. They wouldn't let their kids out. And so it was just a different time. And I think it's really interesting that these kids don't really notice all the stuff and all this change going on. They're just making forts. They see raw materials in order to make things, and I see this in here. So talk to me a little bit about what you were looking for here. Were you trying to find your own childhood in this?
Well, I guess what you mentioned is that it was a time when we could just go out and do what we want as kids and run all the day around. I guess it was as well reason for me to kind of capture a spirit of my childhood, which is actually the same. I lived on a street actually all the day, so I can't imagine my kids doing the same. Actually, what I did in my childhood. And
I talk to people about this all the time. The same idea. Yeah, I couldn't even imagine.
No, the world seems quite dangerous.
It seems
well, despite the fact that probably it's not so dangerous, but
yeah.
Well, we know too much, I guess, about the reality, about what's going on, what people we could meet, and what could happen. and we live in different era, I guess. But yes, I guess it's the kids was a kind of key to that specific social and visual reality, because of course you could meet all the time them. They were running around and they're doing what we can't do now, and our kids
I miss it.
are not allowed to do it. And but this 20 years ago, actually, it was absolutely different situation. And I guess that I kind of felt that I meeting my childhood through them, but of course it's a bit different because I tried to illustrate as well this kind of social landscape of Daugavpils as a city, as a place, and the kids are not so pretending that to be something else or to be kind of more nice, better, or well, of course it's, I know it's very naive idea, but at least they looks more natural than older people who try to kind of put some mask on it and on their face and to be kind of more representable. But so I guess it was a reason to photograph. And not so many, actually, kids I photographed, but it was a reason to photograph kids as part of this landscape, to somehow... My feeling was that they're kind of key to understand the rough beauty of this kind of entropic and disappearing landscape of Daugavpils, and with all these marks of kind of Soviet time, leftovers.
It's a beautiful tension. I think this series has a wonderful tension. I don't know if I want to use wonderful, but there's a very clear tension here between that childhood exploration and that entropic nature of the city. It seems to be a forgotten place, almost decaying. I think it's a very interesting viewpoint. And you said this was a part of your early work?
Oh no, but it's, I guess, could be called one of the earliest works, and of course, no, there is a lot of different works, but I can't present everything. So we can talk about a few series, and it's could be enough, should be enough.
I think if anybody is curious about Alnis's work, you should go and check out his website. He's got great work on there. Each series is really strong and has its own personality. You can see the evolution in his work, and it's fascinating. So I love your photography, but I also love that more conceptual work. So I highly recommend people go check out his website and engage in his work there. So we can continue.
Yeah, of course. So the next series of works which I could kind of describe or present is not even something. It's the same Daugavpils, actually. It's the same city, and still the kind of same interest about the city, which changing, but this change is not so kind of visible, let's say. And the idea, my main idea was that after in the Soviet times, it was kind of tradition to divide city in a kind of functional parts. There's a kind of residential part, there's an industrial part, and this industrial part was located in the periphery of the city, and this residential part was somehow in between them. or somewhere in other place of the city. So after that. After the Soviet time collapse of Soviet Union, of course, the industry kind of stopped to function as it was intended to be, and all these territories, which was used for somehow industrial needs, became approachable because the fences was ruined, and they became approachable for everyone. Everyone could go inside and cross them, or to walk there, and they somehow, talking metaphorically, lost their meaning. If we have some kind of places in a city which we could say that they are kind of destiny of or journeys, they have kind of somehow meaning, social meaning, and that these industrial places became like meaningless places which are only for crossing, and people who live in the city started to use them to just for crossing, because in a time of late evening or night, there is no public transportation, have to come from one point to other point, and the shortcut, it's of course to cross it kind of territory which became suddenly open to everyone, and the people kind of leaving some traces, of course, when they walk. So that was a kind of my interest, it's in a basis of my interest to kind of photograph them at night time. And they, of course, consider it as these meaningless places, consider it as, well, kind of most dangerous places in a city, because actually no one normally considers them as a place to kind of walk or to be here. Just they're always considered as place for living. And I tried to kind of capture this the feeling of danger or feeling of and I actually was not successful. When I processed first films, they turned out kind of very beautiful lit landscapes, nice places actually, and with beautiful colors. And I was really disappointed actually after the first photo films was processed, scanned. I kind of decided, okay, well, I don't know what to do with it. It looks so sweet and romantic, and despite the fact that the feeling about the place when you photograph in a cold winter and with exposure which is kind of 5-10 minutes sometimes, so it means that it's kind of very dark here. And some places, you can see around and to kind of walk very safely. You see the ground, but in some places, like in a woods near the city edge, it's kind of complicated sometimes to find the place where to safely put your foot. And but it looks quite nice and very, very, very beautiful place. And when you kind of get it on a camera, and so there was some disappointment, and after that I understood why not, why not to photograph all these kind of boring and absolutely desert-like places, like very romantic landscapes.
Yeah, I bet that could be a challenge. It's. Nature, when you're doing landscapes, is inherently you can catch these serene moments and these beautiful moments. And I bet that was difficult, trying to capture something that was almost a treacherous, almost a dangerous path, but yet being confronted with these beautiful images all the time. So how did you resolve that? What was your strategy kind of going forward? I bet that was difficult.
Well, it was kind of hard decision after the few months of disappointment to understand that, okay, well, it's could be like that. I mean, aesthetically, because I don't know why, because I know how photography works. I know all the technical aspects of it, but you always feel surprised that the reality looks a bit different than you later get on an image, and especially tonight in night photography, it's always tricky because it's not like Shanghai or New York, where you know that everything is filled with light and you know what you get. But here you're going kind of in an absolutely unknown place. I mean, visually unknown place. Like, for example, this image as well, interesting. It's that there's a house, 5-star house, and the part of it, it's inhabited, and the other one part is kind of unfinished. In the 90s, a lot of actually houses was partly finished when the Soviet Union collapsed. Part of it continued to be empty and never finished. So the people who lived in one part continued to live. Another other part was always like a ghost house.
So people were living in unfinished buildings, like one part.
No.
Explain that. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, this one is finished.
Got you.
Yeah,
so the one
this
part
one is finished actually.
This part wasn't. So they're just kind of.
Yeah, and the other one part, which is partly seen, it's unfinished. So it's like ghost territory. That's this one, and actually, it's not kind of well. It's always considered like most dangerous place, but it's very stereotypically because you barely could meet someone on your road, and if happens that you meet somebody, these persons very often afraid of you. I have a lot of cases when people who kind of notice you in a landscape, they decide to move opposite direction, just go back, not to meet me.
That's true.
Probably I look suspicious with tripod and camera, and that's.
At a distance, you can't tell what you're carrying.
Yeah, but it's true.
A tripod, and I bet at night, that was really, really tough for people. But you can capture in these images, there's a loneliness, I think you were talking about having a difficulty of fighting against these aesthetic images, but I think you've done a really nice job of resolving that, and you've captured the lonely road through the frigid winter, and I think you did a good job. Yeah, I think you reconciled that pretty well. So let's dive into your next series. You have some really interesting conceptual work that we can take a look at.
So, the series name is Mazes Inanimate Likeness Remind You of My Living Self. So it's kind of very often used expression. It's kind of cheap poetics and used very often on a backside of photography, which was sent from some kind of military or army to family or friends at the time of around Second World War, from the period of First World War to Second World War. And I mean on family photos. So if you turn around, it was used in the Russian language. And it was kind of starting point for some kind of ideas which always seemed to me important. It's some kind of blues and trauma of Soviet occupation. And I decided to work with family images. I mean, not my family images, but kind of found, we can call it found images, or on flea markets or something else, which comes from period which is, I would say, most turbulent period. It's a starting from First World War up to Stalin's death on 1953. And how we know, it was a period of two wars, of a lot of changes in this region, which is could be called like post-Soviet countries, and deportations, all what we kind of survived. My grandparents, who survived two wars and got everything what could be worst from Soviet time, kind of all attitude to the people, and both participation in wars, poverty, deportations, all this kind of spectrum of tragedies which related to that period. So I tried to somehow understand these family photos, which always fulfilled with somehow kind of happiness, and I always felt something not right with them, because you can't see in them kind of evidence of that period, of all these tragedies which happened. There's always kind of smiling people, good dressed, more or less good dressed, smiling people, and I tried to somehow scratch, actually not only metaphorically but as well literally, to scratch the surface of this family photo. And I worked with this material and decided to somehow to connect with not only kind of work with language of photography at that period, on family photography, but as well to try to somehow to connect it with materiality of photography. So after that I worked with these family photos in analog way. I used old papers, found papers from Soviet times to print them on it. So it's kind of, it was really complicated to print them, to feed the printer, but I was succeeded after many tries. So that's the result of it. And how you see this one paper comes from 1957, and I always loved these old papers, which always considered as garbage, and I remember all of them from my childhood, when we just running in all these random industrial buildings where a lot of all these papers just thrown on the floor and left. And I was lucky enough to find enough interesting papers in some places which not related to my childhood, but actually still from Soviet times, was still approachable and filled with different kind of garbage, actually. And the part of garbage actually was this old paper.
Are these old schematics and blueprints that you just found in a warehouse, and that's what they are?
It's blueprints. It's blueprints of different kind of industrial, instruments, and sometimes constructions, and all of them is
I bet that was tough to print on.
in Russian language, and actually they don't. Actually, for normal person who are not in it, kind of, I guess professionally, it's absolutely something.
True.
Even if you know Russian, it gives you no clue what is it. So you see like the name of it, общий вид. It's mean general view of of what. And, you never know, but you, of course, could read all these signatures of some persons who proved that it's right and it should be somehow used for something. And there was stamps on it and years. And
did any of the images actually come from your family album at all?
No. They're not part of my family, but they're it's a typical family photography. But I am buying it on a flea market or finding by myself somewhere in abandoned places. And most often, of course, I just buying in a flea market. And, so I don't know the people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love going to the markets here and flipping through some of the old photographs, and I bet it was really interesting. And so I see an intuition here. I see a process that is quite interesting. So kind of talk to me about what it was like to kind of work with that and make these compositions.
Well, partly, of course, it's intuition, which is, and there is a lot of accidental things which uncontrollable by me, because it's kind of analog process. At first stage, I really use bleach and different kind of chemicals to somehow get rid of parts of images, and I'm not very often successful with it, of course, because it's one mistake. It means that you kind of losing the image, and of course it's not clear what is mistake and what is not mistake at the moment. But I try to somehow to remove the parts of identity, trying to describe kind of era of that period in a time which always used the small people, so-called small people, as just decoration for the huge political or social innovations or ideas, and whereas always the small people didn't have any identity, because they was just part of huge society which had some kind of idealistic aims, what to reach, how to develop, and how to grow to somewhere, but how much fake was behind of it, and that is one of the reasons why I try to somehow play with identity of these persons, because they lost their identity in that period, and this on other hand, all these family photos actually don't show any kind of identity of that period of time. So that was kind of on a basis of my kind of approach to somehow to, I don't know, to scratch the surface of if there are any meaning, the meaning of these images, and to somehow connecting with these old papers to give at least some explanation or more emotional explanation of that period of time, which has always been kind of very traumatic for so many, at least.
I'm kind of curious about this. This is kind of philosophical, and so this comes up a lot when I talk about photography, and so I'm kind of curious about the truth of photography. Do you believe a photograph is real, or do you question its reality a lot, or it just seems like you're doing that a lot in your work?
Oh, I guess that, of course, I don't believe that image is somehow connected to reality at all. But I think that I want to scratch the surface of, probably it's the right expression. It's of the understanding of images, how we stereotypically understand the realities that these family photos so sweet, so nice, how they represent ourselves actually, but there's a mask on a mask. There is no reality. So that is the reason I don't believe that I can connect to reality of that period, even if I know a lot of stories about from my family, very private stories, which there is no actually nice stories. There is only tragedies. But even knowing it, I can't approach it, of course. And photography, it's not a medium to help it, but art photography could probably give us some questions and to lead us to some territory of questioning ourselves about what we see and what kind of meaning these signs, which we typically understand as nice portrait of my grandparents, of our family representation, what actually that there something more actually behind of it, what we don't see, what we can't approach, but at least we can give some critical questions about it for ourselves. So that's what art is. What art is made for, to just face us with some critical discussions or ideas, to somehow change our mind about some stereotypes, about past, about our traumas, or our kind of nice and wonderful feelings from looking at something. So, but of course, I don't believe in ideas that photography somehow could describe reality, or even if we talk about just normal photography, which always nowadays seems suspicious.
I couldn't agree more. I am quite fond of this particular image, though. You know, I love the circles and I love the composition, and it is a very, very strong image. And you know, I felt that when I was looking at this series, that you were kind of questioning the authenticity of these images, and you're kind of recrafting them in your own way. And I'm quite taken by it. So it's a very, very strong series.
Thank you.
Of course. And I know you have another project that is also conceptual in its nature. So let's go ahead and take a look at that one, and we'll slide into that next series. So kind of talk to me a little bit about the next series.
Mm-hmm. I think we can finish on this series, and because they somehow related to the previous story, but a bit in different way. Okay, well, yeah. So, the name of the series actually comes from the period of Great Depression era. It was photographed how we know that Rothstein photograph of the skull of Steer on with different kind of views, with dry earth behind and green grass behind. So, and we know this kind of story about manipulation and about all these kind of worries about what it's used for, and how it's kind of used in political communication of Roosevelt period. And not only this one photograph, but the name of series, Bleached Skull of Steer on the Dry Sun-Baked Earth, actually comes from this Rothstein well-known image. And actually, I was a very long period of time interested in all these archive images, and the Farm Security Administration project about redepression time, about all this farmer migration, about actually very turbulent time in America from 1935 to 1943. And I guess it's a hugest archive created by photographers about some specific period in a time which is really a kind of turbulent time for American society, which is really kind of connected to a lot of tragedies, socio-political and economical. And on the other hand, it's a kind of very interesting archive, this Farm Security Administration archive, which is available for everyone to go through it and to search it. And it's somehow connected as well to my ideas about photography, which is used for some kind of purpose to for example, in political communication. And this Farm Security Administration project, it's seemingly very documentary, actually kind of was criticized in a period of when it was created, and as very socialistic, actually. And Roosevelt, American President Roosevelt, used it for kind of some getting support to his politics, and when we approach that kind of huge archive, the most interesting, at least for me, it's how the small, so-called small people are represented. Do we kind of able to get some truly private and truly realistic stories about their lives? And of course we can see that a lot of people moving around, living on a tents, living on a street actually, and surviving in a very harsh obstacles. But we actually not able to approach how kind of these stories behind of it, because actually it's not there. It's we can see the kind of narrative what photographers constructed. We can kind of follow the roads of photographers, but we're not able to kind of connect to that reality. And it's again same the story, like with these family images from Soviet times, which I showed in a previous series and use it. It's the same story that we are not able kind of to connect to it, and it's kind of this stereotype that photography should represent something and should tell the story somehow related to that period of time, or to tell something about these people who appear in the photos. And in reality, you're not able to grasp kind of even perception of that period. You're just kind of getting some kind of, at least it's about me story, it's not about everyone. And I'm getting that I'm just illustrating my stereotypes about tragedies of past, and I'm not getting kind of closer to reality. So, and it's again somehow about representation, and I used all these images, well, not of course all of them, but I used these images to somehow to decontextualize these elements in them and to connect them in another way. Let's call it collage. And I printed these collages on old photo paper, which created like chemigrams using developer and a few other chemicals to give some background, like this. And after that, on these chemograms, I used pigment ink printer to print these my collages. So that's kind of short explanation what we see here. And somehow I feel that the latest works which I'm doing, like previous is family photos and this one, I feel that I want to kind of leave real photography behind me, behind my praxis, because very often living in a digital era of photography as artists, we have a lot of prints which are somehow exhibited somewhere, and later they're just disappearing very often because they're just created for exhibition purposes, like these festival images and on the other hand, I have boxes with my printed works somewhere in some warehouse staying there, and after 10 years they somehow looks not so good, like I can print them better now, but actually living without kind of real works behind of me. I have kind of digital archives, but not real works. So, and I decided to kind of move to that direction, to materiality of photography. These are unique copies, same like previous theories. They are unique copies. It's exists only one image, and that's it. Of course, I can digitally scan it and print it, but it's not that. And the real value in that image, so I can put it in a box and close the box and put it on my shelf. So that's it. And I somehow feel that I went too far away from reality with what I'm doing in photography. So that's the reason why I'm kind of going closer to material things. And on the other hand, I feel that era of artificial intelligence as well somehow makes some marks in my understanding of photography. And I'm not sure that I want to go kind of to this purely digital world, and which is kind of very interesting. And but I mean, like artist, I feel that I want to kind of, at least with one hand, to stay in reality, in physical reality, and that's the reason why I'm doing artist books, and which are as well absolutely seemingly unreasonable, because you can't reproduce them. You're making one exemplar, and it's edition 1 of 1, and there is no publishing house who would like to publish it, of course. And the same like these works, it's they not very useful for exhibitions, so you have to kind of really use this one copy of it somewhere to send it to. And it's kind of very complicated because it's very expensive when you want to use it. But on the other hand, it's really heartwarming when you have that image. You can take it, and it's yours, and it lives. It's often.
What size is this?
These are 24 to 30 centimeters. It's a small.
They're very expressive. They're very graphic. You have a very, very cool process here. And so talk to me a little bit about the images that you're using here. It seems like you're metaphorically trying to speak to us in a certain way. So I'm curious, what ideas are you playing with here?
I wanted to somehow deconstruct and reconstruct this Farm Security Administration archive, and most typical images, which are kind of landscape and houses, like for example this, and actually persons who are photographed very often in the same in the same way, similar way. There are 100 portraits of people in almost similar dresses and similar clothings and the similar poses. So I try to use these kind of very often repeating elements, reconstructing somehow. Rearranging them in some different ways and trying to somehow symbolically to comment the idea of that period, how the people was forced to move to find a place, and despite the fact that the government tried to support them, of course, but that instability of reality of actually being on the road all the time, and that's the main idea. What I want to somehow, of course, ironically and critically somehow approach, and it's my language. It's photography elements, like for example these small houses which actually look similar, cheap, and and kind of functions as a symbols of that period, of social reality of that period. And so putting them on a cactus, it's somehow describes that instability of that.
You definitely captured it in that image, for sure.
Yeah.
They're really, really interesting, and I love what you're pointing to, and so they're pretty powerful. And I saw this series on your website, and I just had to ask you what was going on with it. So thank you for taking the time to take us through it. I'm noticing a common theme in your work, and you're commenting a lot on social issues and political issues, and I'm seeing this common thread, and you're challenging what an image is. And how important is it to you to make that kind of emphasis in your work?
Well, I live in a social reality, of course, and I'm somehow related to all these collective things, and I think it's art is a good way how to approach it and try to, cross, if you can say that, and to survive in a world which sometimes boring, sometimes repeating itself, sometimes kind of dangerous for us. And but that the one other aspect, of course, which is always follows my work, is that self-portrait moment, and most of the series actually is related to kind of my own self-therapeutic moments. It's hard to explain, but all these emotional and unconscious decisions, which are part of every series of works, doesn't matter. Sometimes it's related to real constructions of works. Sometimes it's related to walking in a landscape and photographing. It's related to my kind of getting different, to becoming a different person or better person. I don't know, maybe not better person, but at least it's somehow always keeps me alive. And photography, it's a huge part of my self-understanding. So and it's impossible to describe it, because it's not important for other persons, because other persons could read in these images probably social political ideas, probably some ironic aspects, probably artists who plays or experiments. But this self-portrait things is kind of very important for me, because these images represents for me myself. And well, I'm not talking a lot about it, but it's a huge part of doing arts, and for me. at least.
It connects a lot of dots. I can see that connection in your work, especially when I was diving into your website. I just saw a common thread, and hearing you today, I noticed it as well. And so I do have a question for you, which is I'm kind of curious about. And it's more based around the role of an artist. Do you think it's important for an artist to question the world around them, to be asking questions like that? What do you think the role is in the world when we're surrounded by images and they're all influencing us in so many different ways? Do you think it's the role of the artist to be asking those big questions, or what do you think the importance is?
Well, at least partly, of course, but it's one of huge stereotypes that the art could, well, change the world. And if we as artists could change something, we would not live it in that world like we live now. It's I wish art could change something, but I think for small part of society, art could give some kind of territory to live and approach or to face some meanings and ideas which are not told in conventional ways. So with help of art, you can get kind of rid of that triangle, which I call kind of job, supermarket, and your bed. So you can get out of it and to live kind of more fully, and to get some fun, to get some knowledge, to get some entertainment, and to get some possibility to somehow think about reality more critically or deep, if you want to do it. But of course, art can't force someone to, I don't know, change, to think critically. But it gives like small portal in a reality where you can just go to other place where reality rules does not exist, and you can get liberation from very conventional, traditional things. So that's, I think, somehow connects art to religion in the past, when it was kind of place where the people could meet and talk about unusual things. And so the art is a kind of repeating it and giving that opportunity to people to just be together and to talk or think about reality or unreality or inner worlds in some unusual way. So it's kind of place where to be and to change your mind if you want to do it. So, but I don't believe that art could change the world. So it's, of course.
That's so true. You often hear that as you're growing up, especially in America, we have this thing that you can change the world, get out there, and it seems more like an inspirational token these days. And so I think that's really, really interesting. But it kind of gets me back to this fact that you have to really change yourself, and by changing yourself, you actually are changing the world by in that way. But that's a fascinating, and I love your practical take on that. So I'm going to finish with just one more question, and this question is one that I ask everyone. And we have a lot of people that follow this show that are image makers themselves, and I'm kind of curious if you have any advice for makers that are trying to make their way in the art world or just image making world today. So do you have any advice for anyone that's out there trying to make it these days?
Well, it's kind of very serious, but on the other hand, it's a very simple question. if you want to do something, then just do. It's not. There's no. It's just art. I guess it's. I don't want to repeat my answer to previous question, but it's a way how we can live without that kind of very traditional, boring approach to our lives that we have created in capitalism, that we going to work, eating, sleeping, drinking, sex, and repeating it. So art gives opportunity to be a different person and be always in a question with about reality, about yourself and relationships to the world, to other people. And I guess it gives more energy to survive than different kind of other entertainments like alcohol, sex, and all other stuff, which is used by people to get out of reality.
Well, it's very practical advice again, and so I really, really like that. It came up in another show. It's like, just do it. So I think that is just wonderful advice. If you want to do something, just get out there and just do it. So thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really enjoyed having you.
Thank you for inviting.
And thank you everyone that has joined us this far. If you like content like this, please consider supporting us by liking, sharing, and commenting. It actually helps us with the algorithm, as well as consider supporting us on Patreon. That's how you can actually support programs like this and help us stay out here bringing you more content like this. And as always, we'll see you next time.